How's it going? Today we got a quick review, well we'll see how quick it is, of the Benchmade Bugout. This is one of, I don't know, like 3 different variations in color. The main one that you'll probably have seen if you haven't seen this one is the blue GFN scale. GFN means glass filled nylon. The blue scale with the plain blade, plain satin finish blade. This has a kind of OD green with a gray coated blade and little bits of bronze hardware, bronze thumb studs. And then there have been other little kind of sprint runs, if you will, but that was like the Benchmade Blackout, which I don't know if that was the actual real name or not, but basically all black coated blade, black scales, black hardware, black thumb studs. I think that was a Blade HQ exclusive. But yeah, this is the story behind this knife for me is a little weird. I knew I wanted one just because everyone has one. They say it's the best knife ever, blah 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 blah. So I was trying to see if I could get one for not full price, basically. And it turns out I had some REI credit as well as an REI coupon. And I think, or maybe it was the Black Friday deal last year, or there was some sale going on. So there was like a decent discount on the knife itself, and I used REI credit and ended up getting this guy for $30, I think. So that's a decent chunk down, a decent chunk cheaper than the retail of $140. So I'm glad that worked out. But to get going, we can start off with a characteristically Benchmade off-center blade. I mean, I can push it over and it looks fine, but as soon as I kind of mess with it a little bit, well, actually no, it held up pretty good. Not too bad. Let's see if there's a little bit of play, but also, I don't know, maybe that's just because of the scales. But anyway, it's a Benchmade. It's their best-selling knife. I think it's actually Blade HQ's best-selling knife as well. Very affordable. It's extremely lightweight, very minimal in the pocket. Comes with a deep carry clip, which a lot of people like. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this knife. I really don't. It's cool. It's very light. It's very EDC friendly. You honestly forget about it when you're carrying it because it's so small. It's so thin, and it's a dream to carry, really, which is great. But I think the thinness gets me. I don't like how thin it is. It feels flimsy. It feels like if you do anything more than cut paper with this, it's gonna break. I'm sure that's not true, or else people wouldn't like it as much as they do. These scales, I mean, let's see if I can bend them, which I don't like, even though there's kind of a half steel liner system going on here, half steel. It's like from here over, so it manages the lock, manages the axis lock and the pivot and whatnot, but I don't know. I don't like these scales. Maybe that's what it is. I also don't like the blade coating because I can clean this guy with whatever and all these weird little marks will still be here. I don't know what this is coated with, but I don't like it. One thing I will say is that I think the Bugout shines best when it has nothing to do, when it looks nothing like this. If you are very active in the knife community at all, you'll see that people love these knives, and a lot of people will put aftermarket scales on them. They'll put micarta scales, other G10 scales. They'll put Rogue Blade Works' very famous carbon fiber scales on here that look amazing. And I think that looks great. And honestly, if I cared enough to spend the money on this knife, that's what I would do in a heartbeat. But I don't care, because I would rather spend the $200 odd to make this knife cool on something else. If Benchmade would make a carbon fiber version of this knife, or even better, put this in their customizer, they would make a killing. They would put every other secondary marketplace out of business in a heartbeat, and I have no idea for the life of me why they don't do that. they obviously have the materials. They make knives in just about every material you can imagine besides the super high-end ones. They could sell titanium scales. They could make carbon fiber scales. They could do G10 scales. They could, I don't know. I just don't understand. Like that is, whenever I handle this knife, that's what I think of. I think of Benchmade. What kind of business model are you using to where you only offer 2 variations of this knife, minus the gold edition, which is ridiculous. It's like $800, which no one wants to buy. No one cares that much for this knife. But if you put in your customizer and let people pick the blade finish and the hardware colors, just like you do with the Griptilian, the Barrage, the I can't remember the name, and I just totally ruined my train of thought. Oh jeez, sorry, it's gonna kill me now that I can't remember the name of the one. Crooked River. Jesus Christ, it's Crooked River. The Benchmade, they offer the Griptilian, the mini Griptilian, the Barrage, the full size or the mini Barrage, the Crooked River, the mini Crooked River, and I think they have the other ones, maybe fixed blade. I don't know. I could be talking out of my ass there, but I just, whenever I think of this knife, I just don't understand why Benchmade hasn't done that yet. It makes no sense. They could make so much money. They could really satisfy the community in a lot of ways to where you don't have to go and spend an extra $200 to make this knife look cool and feel cool in the way you want it to be. But that's the reality we're living in right now. So I'm sure you're watching this and you're like, wow, that's really devolved really quickly. And yes, it did. So let us get back into the specs of this knife. This guy, folding knife with Benchmade's, I don't know if it's proprietary, but I think it is. We'll call it the signature. The signature axis lock comes to deployment. Overall length is just under 7.5 inches. With the blade is a CPM S30V with 3.2 inches. So very EDC friendly size. With the GFN glass-filled nylon scales. It has a 4.2 inch handle, and the weight is 1.8 ounces, which is insane. And I would be interested to see how the weight compares if you use carbon fiber scales. I imagine carbon fiber is heavier than this glass-filled nylon, but I don't know. I have no idea. I guess I really hashed out my thoughts on this knife in the beginning of the video, so now I'll have to keep going here to not look like an idiot. Like I said, the retail on this guy is $140. They carry this knife in a lot of places, so it's very easy to find because it's so popular. But if we want to get back into construction, you can see that there's a lot of body screws here. This screw and actually I think it's just these two. These two screws act as kind of anchors for the steel liners that are in there, which you probably will not be able to see no matter my best efforts. I mean, you can see the back of it right here. That's where the liners come through, which also serves as jimping, which is pretty ineffective, honestly. My thumb just slides right over these with no real added friction. There's no jimping on the blade, which is where it should be. The knife is very small, very thin, and I don't know. I just, me gripping and squeezing this knife right now, I feel like it's bending, and I hate it. I hate it. I don't know why. Yeah, this knife is so weird to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just used to really big, like hefty tank knives now at this point, which is kind of sad, but also not. So I don't know. This knife, I guess it comes down to personal preference, as it does with most knives, but with this knife in particular, because if you want a real EDC friendly knife and you're okay with this being able to be bent when you're using it, then go for it. But I feel like if you do anything, like if you try to cut anything serious with this, it's gonna bend. It's not gonna cut. I don't know. This is like, I'm sorry, I'm just at a loss for words. I'm trying to figure out why I don't like this knife. I guess it's because the thinness of it, it just doesn't feel solid. I mean, there's no blade play, but still, it's the scales. It's the scales for me, and I wonder if, you know, I had Flytanium scales or micarta or any other like thicker material, if then that would alleviate my aggravation with this knife, but I'm not sure. But as much as I dislike this knife, I can appreciate parts of it. The blade is fantastic. It's a very generic shape, but it looks good. It's got a nice flat grind here with a little bitty swedge up top, sharpening choil. The thumb studs work well. Deep carry clip is always nice to see. Very generous lanyard hole here. You can get backspacers to go between these. I think Rock Scale Designs does those. But good ergonomics, minus the fact that it's very slim. The handle shape is very generic, fits well, does its job. A little bit of texturing here on the show side and the lock side of this knife. It doesn't do a lot. It's not super functional, but of course it's better than just having flat GFN. I'm sure it also satisfies an aesthetic look as well. You have a two-way reversible pocket clip. You can see that there are 3 holes here, whereas only 2 of them are used for the deep carry, and that's for, let's see if here we go. My 940, you can see that the typical Benchmade clip has 3 screws in it, so I guess if you use the deep carry, it only comes with 2, or it only uses 2 of them. Benchmade's signature access lock, which allows you to do fun stuff and fidget. Very fun to use. But yeah, we might as well do a size comparison before I get mad again. So let's bring up the Osborne to the 940 that I just had, and the 940 is also a tremendously successful knife. This particular one is almost identical in size and ratio, at least. The handle's a little bit bigger, but the grip area is about the same. Blade length, I keep calling it Osborne, I'm sorry. The 940 blade's a little bit bigger. Cutting edge is roughly similar. This is a combo edge, so I know a lot of you are screaming at me through your phones or computer, whatever you're watching, but this knife is much smoother. That's another thing with this guy, and it could be due to a number of things. It could be these scales, it could be the fact that the blade is coated, but for whatever reason, the knife, this is, for an axis lock, this is uncharacteristically stiff. And you know, I mean, I'm flipping it around like I am right now, but compare that to this, where I like barely have to move for this knife to retract, but to the close. I guess the closing is the biggest one, but and I haven't cleaned this guy in a while, so. But like this knife just drops. This knife it takes no effort to open it or close it, whereas with this guy, you have to really kind of help it closed. So. Let's keep going with our size comparison here. We'll keep out the 940 just for kicks, because it's a similar size. We'll bring out the PM2, another crazy successful knife, and you can see that if we swap these guys around and line them up, you can see the handle size of the PM2 is monstrous compared to it. Blade, however, the blade itself is bigger, definitely wider, or I don't know what you want to call it, wider. But cutting edge is almost the same. I think that's partially due to the blade shape here. This kind of clip point on the the PM2. And then we can bring it for funsies. The Ultratech handle's bigger. Blade is about the same size. Cutting edge is actually a little bit smaller. So. Yeah, let's see what else I want to say about this knife that is maybe a little bit more constructive. Okay, how about value? Value. I think this knife is overpriced. How about that? I think $140 is too much for these quite frankly, flimsy handles. And I don't know, maybe the blade coating adds a little bit of money, but let's see what else. This Delica, this isn't a really old Delica, but the Delica right now I think is around $70 to $90, and they're basically the same knife. And think that is more price. This is almost half the price of the Bugout. I think the Bugout is too expensive. I think it should be cheaper for what you're getting. I don't know of any knife that's cheaper than this, honestly, in Benchmade's lineup, and maybe that has something to do with it. But I think for the price, this should be cheaper. I think the what you're getting here is less valuable than a Delica. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't handled any new Delicas in a while. And this is a heavy personal preference for some people because this has a lock back, which is weird and is not easily operable with one hand. So, as opposed to the Axis lock, which, you know, albeit stiff, is still better. So, let's see, summing it up, I think this knife is a little too flimsy. I think Benchmade is stupid for not offering this in their custom lineup, or their customizer, whatever you want to call it. I think that it is overpriced. I think it is a little overhyped, honestly, because like I said, this is a tremendously successful knife across the board. And I can see why, you know, maybe, I think for me, this would be like a good starter knife for your kid. Like if your kid doesn't have a knife and you want to get him a knife, I think this could do it. Your kid's not going to be prying stuff. They're not going to be cutting wood. They're just going to be using it for whatever they're going to do, which is probably just cutting small things, opening boxes, which honestly is what most of us do with even our most tanky knives. But I think this is a good beginner knife. It's a good entry-level knife because I think really there's only up. It only goes up from here. Yeah, I don't know why this review became so negative so quickly, but I think I'm just not part of the hype train. I'm not in the hype train. I think the hype train is wrong. I think the hype train needs to stop and turn around and go the other direction. But that's enough of a train metaphor. So, yeah, I don't know what happened to this review, but those are kind of my raw, unfiltered thoughts on this. So hopefully that is remotely amusing to someone out there. So, thank you for watching. If you stuck with me this long through this perilous journey, this has been the Benchmade Bugout.